This is a T&D rocker with a Manton pushrod. This is a stock GM rocker with a Texas Speed pushrod. So why do we have these when we could just run these? Let's talk about it. What's up guys? We're back and it's Tech Tip Thursday. Today I want to talk to you about why we're running the T&D roller rockers, some of the advantages that we have with this rocker over the factory GM rockers, and even some of the other aftermarket rockers, as well as the Manton pushrods over a factory pushrod, or even some of the other pushrods on the market. Also, I need to make a quick clarification. On the build video for this engine, I said that we're using Jezel rockers. That's incorrect. We're running T&D rockers, and I didn't catch that until the video was already uploaded, so that's my mistake. But T&D is on board and they're here to stay. So with that, let's get into the video. Before we get into why we have these and move on to the installation, I want to take a couple minutes to talk about the differences between the two. What we have here is a factory GM rocker. This is off of an L86. The LT1 and most LS engines are fairly similar. This pushrod is actually an aftermarket pushrod. This is a Texas Speed branded 7.4 length, .080 wall, 5/16 diameter pushrod. This is the pushrod, and this is comparable to the rocker that you're gonna find in 90% of the builds out there. So what are the differences between the two of these? Let's start with the rockers. So the first thing everyone knows about LS and LT rockers is they have about 30 to 35 needle bearings inside here. What happens is this fails, the needle bearings fall out, and you lose the rocker. This is where your popular trunion mod comes in, and that's what a lot of people will do to these rockers. But if we look in the T&D, the first thing you notice, we have a much larger diameter shaft. This shaft is also a lot stronger. It's made out of 4130, and it has the trunnion mod already done. One of the big things that I like about this is that the trunnion is cooled by engine oil instead of being a self-contained unit. The other major difference you'll notice here, this is a roller tip versus a non-roller tip. Why does that matter? We're gonna spin this engine to somewhere around 8 to 9,000 RPM. We're gonna feed it a lot of boost, and that means crazy high cylinder pressures. One of the main advantages of the roller rocker is that above 5,000 RPM, there's less friction, which means more power, and of course there's reduced wear on the valve stem. One of the other main construction differences here is that the T&D rocker is a billet steel. The GM rocker is a cast steel, and a lot of the other aftermarket units you'll find are in aluminum. For the RPM we're dealing with and the cylinder pressure we're dealing with, we need billet steel to handle this. One of the major differences between these rockers is the weight. The GM rocker is just shy of 5 ounces, whereas the T&D rocker is much heavier at almost 7 ounces. Heavier rocker means we need a stronger spring, means we need a stronger pushrod. Moving on to the pushrods. Obviously the Manton is a larger diameter, which will give it extra strength. However, this is stronger even than some of the other 3/8 pushrods you can buy. What Manton has found is that if you're able to study the pushrod in slow motion at high RPM, the pushrod will actually flex like the pole of a pole vaulter. This is a welding wire, so obviously it's much weaker. What happens is that as the stress compresses this pushrod, it will flex and it will spring back. What this leads to is oscillation in the valve and inconsistent valve timing. And the last thing you probably notice here, the Manton pushrod is modular. This is a 3-piece design where we have the shaft and the 2 ends that are separate. The reason to do that is that the ends are a different material that is designed to take the abuse of the rocker or the lifter beating up on this pushrod. These are Manton Series 5 pushrods, which are made of 4130 chromoly and heat treated to over 375,000 PSI tensile strength. So there is no distortion here whatsoever. Before we install the pushrod and rocker on the exhaust valve of this cylinder, we need to make sure we're on the base circle of the cam. Easiest way to do that is to make sure the intake valve is already open. So we're gonna slip our pushrod in. One more thing I want to point out about these T&D rockers is they have this adjustment right here that allows you to fine-tune your lifter preload. Without this, you have to do it with pushrod length. We have a comp link bar short travel lifter in this engine, and going to the next size pushrod would bottom out the plunger on that lifter. This allows us to dial in the preload perfectly. Before we installed this rocker, we made sure that this adjustment was all the way out. As you can see here, we have a decent amount of play. So the first thing we're gonna do is take the play out of this and take this to what's called zero lash. That means that there's no movement, but there's also no tension. You can see now we have no movement here, but also no tension. So now that we have this set to zero lash, we can go ahead and set our preload. Before we do that, we're just gonna slip a wrench on here. Now we're gonna hold the wrench in place and turn this one full turn. That's half, that's one. Now our preload is set. So the only thing we have to do now is tighten down this nut, which will lock everything in place. I hope that makes sense for you guys. When it comes to valve train, this is not a place where you want to cut corners and cut costs. I know these parts are expensive, but if you have a piston kiss a valve, it gets much more expensive very quickly. If you want to see the assembly of this engine and get all the details, make sure you check out our LT1 build video. I'll put a link in the description below. Please be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. If you have questions or comments, drop them below. That's it for this one. Thanks, guys.